Welcome to Hey, great shot. This is a Great Shot Podcast, a Crack Rackets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On tonight's show, we have a live NCAA selection show reaction edition of The Deciding Point for all of you college tennis fans. This is going to be a fun show. The 2024 NCAA tournament draws have officially been released. We know what the run for all of these teams in the postseason might just look like. So much forecasting to do, so much reacting to do. Let's get right to doing that. Joining me on the podcast tonight to help do so, our two returning champions, our two co-hosts of The Deciding Points. Let's start with the returning champion of returning champions here on our Crack Rackets podcast, founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog, and of course podcast. He's been our on-the-ground correspondent for so much of this 2024 college tennis season. I know I and the entire college tennis universe are looking forward to seeing him in Stillwater. It is, of course, our dear friend John J. Parsons joining us once again. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. We know these NCAA draws. How excited are you, my friend, for the postseason ahead?
Oh, I'm excited. This is like Christmas morning for those who celebrate. You get to see the reveals, both the brackets and the lineups, which at this point, given all of the fantastic work Chris does at College Tennis Ranks and nailing these brackets ahead of time, it's really the lineups for me that get me excited. But yeah, this is a very exciting time of year.
And we're going to get into the lineups. We're going to offer our reactions again, our initial reactions. We'll get more into the nuances as we go later into the week. For what it's worth, quick broadcasting schedule. My plan is to have live shows every night in the lead up to this NCAA tournament here on our Crack Rackets YouTube channel. Of course, we'll have a lot of coverage of the NCAA tournament, hopefully here on our YouTube channel as well. So, again, I want to generate that excitement, get things going. Jay will be joining me tomorrow night to break down the women's draw in further depth. And our second guest tonight will be joining me on Wednesday night to make the men's draw. Let's introduce him now. Of course, we all know him as the forefather of the College Tennis Ranks formula predictions, never far from the listed UTR, the lean, mean Michigan Wolverine, and a man I have referred to repeatedly over the past week as 2012 Nate Silver. As you mentioned it, Jay, he got all of the top 16 seed projections correct. His website has been a godsend for all of us trying to figure out what this postseason might look like. Again, he is the most desired man in college tennis right now. It's Chris Halioris joining us once again on the show. Chris, hey, great shot. I know today is your Super Bowl, your Armageddon. All the adjectives apply. Did it live up to the hype? How are you feeling?
I mean, I'm feeling great, but you're wrong on one point. I am like the least favorite man in college tennis right now because it's done. I was the most favorite for the last week. Now everybody's forgotten about it, and that's okay. I get some time off, and we get to do a little of this. But it's YouTube. We can do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's been it's been a fun week. I'm super happy that that we got all 16 seeds in order correct on both sides. Again, a special anonymous shout out to the person, hopefully you're watching, that clued me into the fact that my tiebreaker did not account for the fact that if there was a less than 1% difference in the teams, there was no point awarded, which would have made a difference in the Virginia-Texas TCU swap that we'll get into. So that sort of hint allowed me to make that one correct and not be wrong there. So I appreciate that to you. You know who you are. And it's been a great week.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Chris, to you for all that you do. Coaches may be forgetting about you over the next week as they prepare. We certainly will not be here at Crack Rackets, and I know you're going to be helping us with our college tennis coverage coming up. And so, obviously, I've appreciated all the work you've done behind the scenes as well. That said, let's not waste any more time. Let's react to this 2024 NCAA tournament draw. Let's start the way they started with our selection shows. And by the way, I appreciate all the kind texts I have received. It was an absolute pleasure, an honor, a thrill to be on that NCAA selection show. I haven't been that nervous for a show to go live in quite some time. It's just because I know all these coaches and teams are watching. They want to know their fates. And so, again, I've been living in fear over the past hour that I offered some sort of objectionable take out there to someone. Hopefully I didn't. But by the way, if I did, or you have any thoughts, questions, reactions you want to offer us, that's why we're live. That's why doing this on YouTube is so great. Throw those questions in the chat. We will do our best to react to them, to answer them as we move forward here tonight. Let's start again chronologically with the men's draw. It has been revealed. We know our top 16 seeds. Again, the big movement is at the bottom of these top 16 seeds. In the end, tiebreakers played out as Chris forecasted. He explained that, I believe, on last week's show. But A&M vaulting past Mississippi State, South Carolina. South Carolina edged out as the last team. Chris, let's just start again, location-wise, where it all shook out. Were you surprised by anything off the top?
Not surprised, just very, we've had it forecasted that way for the last week. Just unfortunate for a team like South Carolina, who's going to finish ranked number 16 and get bumped out of a hosting spot due to the tiebreaker rules. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just, if you're that team and you finish 16, you want to be there, and you got bumped. And we kind of knew that was coming because they lost that tiebreaker to Texas A&M. But no, there were no real surprises there. I would say the surprise hosting site wise was the dilemma of, do you prefer the integrity of the draw where you try to give like the 15, 16 teams the number 17, 18 types in the first round, or do you really go by the letter of the law with the rules, which is just go for the minimum number of flights? And clearly, with what they did at Mississippi State, it was just go for the minimum number of flights, because they got a couple tough teams there, but they were lower end 2 seeds for the number 16 seed, not a 17 or 18, 19 type team.
I agree with your assessment. Again, that's why we defer to you on these things. I would also point out, you've kind of taken away the surprise because we can all look at your projected rankings and you have that cutoff line so accurate. So, again, yeah, there was a little drama this past weekend. Nebraska beating Illinois. They had that Ohio State match to get into the tournament, but they just ultimately miss out on the field. Was it Rice, I want to say, on the men's side? Chris, who was the last team in? I'll defer to you on that.
Last at large.
Yeah, last at large. And again, you're so accurate with your projections. There wasn't that much surprise for me. I felt bad because the host was kind of like, so thoughts on the field? And I'd be like, I've known the field for 2 weeks. Like, I'm religious with collegetennisranks.com. You should be as well. But the other side, Jay, of reacting to a draw reveal like this, where was Stanford going? I think that was the biggest question of, as a looming team, the talent they have on paper, they weren't going to be a top 16 seed. So after that, you want to know, who are they going to face in a potential round 2 battle? We saw that team go on the road, beat Harvard last year, and a lot of familiar faces on this squad who executed that last season. Ultimately, they're going to Oklahoma. Like, that was my first whoa moment of, okay, that's what I'm locked in on. That's the first, second round that stuck out to me. What were the things when the draw was revealed, your biggest takeaways, or dare I say, moments like that?
Well, one note, Stanford has done this the past 2 years to Ivy League schools. They went to Harvard 2 years ago, Columbia last year. They've emerged as the unseeded team. And so this year they go to Oklahoma. There's some Stanford-Oklahoma history. The Stanford women went to Oklahoma 2 years ago in 2022. They did not advance out of that super regional. That was the year Oklahoma made the NCAA final. Stanford was certainly the unseeded team you're always curious to see. I think on the South Carolina note, definitely unfortunate they're playing some of the best tennis of those teams who did sneak in as top 16 seeds. And that's where you wonder, should there be a little bit more human discretion aspect of this to look at some of the momentum? On the men's side, I was curious to see what teams would be in the top seeded regions. I think where they did a better job this year on the integrity, and Chris, I'm curious to get your thoughts, is that sometimes we've seen a 17, 18, 19 go to a top 8 team, and it seems like that we avoided some of those situations this year. For example, I know TCU has gotten a 17 or 18 team in the past. On the women's side, we've seen that. So I thought overall, I know there's some questions about the integrity when it comes to who is your 3 and 4, and maybe you're getting someone that should be more of a 2 seed, but overall, I thought the top teams avoided any really egregious integrity violations.
Yeah, I think that's a fair look. Again, where would South Carolina go? being knocked out of those top 16 seeds that they go to NC State, who's 14. Again, integrity-wise, that feels pretty even. Not a horrible draw, and about what you would expect in that seeding range. And again, South Carolina's been a roller coaster all season long. I thought it was my favorite part is that they're in the same quarter, as Virginia. Like, there's a world where we see a rematch there. Of course, South Carolina beat Virginia in their first match of the season in Charlottesville, in Iñaki-less Virginia. But yeah, obviously those were the two most fascinating teams. You were wondering where they were going. Some really good first-round matches. Chris mentioned it. Memphis, Georgia Tech's a really fun one. I'm blanking on who Baylor draws, but the winner of that I remember can push.
San Diego.
Yeah, Baylor, San Diego. I like that.
It was
matchup.
Middle Tennessee, Georgia Tech.
Oh, Middle Tennessee. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, again, we'll get into that further as we go. By the way, also worth noting, we're going to have some coaches join us here on tonight's show. Simon Earnshaw, Allison Ojeda, Clancy Shields going to be joining us periodically. Let's go to the women's side, though, now here. And again, I want to start with you, Chris. Mathematically, seeding-wise, all the different tiebreakers, no one knows them better than you. 16 for 16. Once again, I dare anyone to try and project a field better than Chris Halioris. Shout out to you on the seeding. Location-wise, integrity-wise, travel matrix-wise, your reaction to the women's draw.
I mean, yeah, no big objections. Obviously, we got that one spot on again. There were two swaps on the women's side there. With Florida jumping up over NC State and Virginia Pepperdine swap. But
can you explain that Florida one real quickly, because that one was very, very tightly contested. I didn't quite understand it.
On the Florida women jumping the
NC State women? Yes.
Yeah, so, obviously, for those that don't know what goes into play, there's 4 categories that go into play that they evaluate every set of teams back to back in the draw for when they do that. And those 4 categories are strength of schedule, head to head, common opponents, and top 50 wins. And what happened there is strength of schedule is effectively the ITA rank, and it's a difference in your percentage of difference in points. But NC State got the edge there. But Florida took them because Florida had a better record against common opponents. They were 3-1 versus NC State's 2-3. And then top 50 wins, Florida had 13 and NC State 10. So Florida and they didn't play head to head. So by nature there, 2-1 in favor of Florida. And yet it gets, understandably, it can get really dicey because the rule is really the top 50 wins. If you look at the rules, is worded as record against teams in the tournament at time of selection. And then when you look at the formula, they just use the top 50. Well, we never get down to 50. It's probably 47, 48. But then do you count the conference winners or not? And you could have a really good record against the 40 to 50 teams and not so good against the top 20. And you'll win out because you have more top 50 wins. And I think that's probably the contention there. And surely we'll get to hear from Coach Earnshaw on that. But that was why Florida had more top 50 wins and a better record against the common opponents that the two schools played.
Yeah. Jay, Chris, again, lays out the case better than anyone. That was certainly a big note because now NC State, they don't get a rematch with Michigan. Instead, they get an NCAA semifinal rematch from last season, potentially, with Stanford in the round of 16. I mean, there's some spice beyond that. The prospect of a Duke-Tennessee second-round match, licking your chops at perhaps watching that. I'm blanking. I apologize. There's a lot of teams running through my head of who SMU plays. I like that SMU team. They're battle-tested, but I think they're going to the Texas A&M region. Oh, no, it's not SMU versus Oklahoma, but still, the big name, that's the thing that stood out to me. Texas A&M, their pathway, a potential round of 16 with UNC, if they can get there, because Oklahoma coming to town in the regional, obviously that is a team who brings the energy, battle-tested, very good at doubles. All these different things working in there. They won't be afraid to go to College Station, earn that victory. Your reaction to the women's draw?
Well, when we started seeing that projection on Chris's site, that was the one we all circled. This Texas A&M team with Carson Branstein back in the lineup. Are they a national title contender? That remains to be seen, but they are playing host to a very tricky Oklahoma team, the winner to advance and play North Carolina, who's starting to play their best tennis. Overall, big picture in this women's draw, I thought 3 of the 4 quarters are relatively balanced. And I think Michigan is a huge draw winner here on the women's side. I think of those top 4 seeds, they have the most straightforward path to the semifinals. And I thought the Pepperdine section of that is tough for USC. USC gets a San Diego team who they lost to in their region, and then they would have to face a Pepperdine team who they also lost to. So in terms of seeds, I thought USC was a draw loser.
Two things you reminded me of there. First, I love the state of Florida championship that is the Florida draw. FIU's lost to 2 teams. They get a rematch against one of them, Miami, in round number 1. Winner of that likely to face Florida, who I believe faces North Florida in round number 1. I mean, again, create the second trophy. As I said on the selection show, that's a really fun set of 4 teams. Again, the travel matrix can be frustrating at times, but that's a fun little subplot to enjoy. And again, Miami versus Florida feels a little Spider-Man meme-y. Like, that's a very fun matchup if we do see that. If FIU gets through Miami, now they get that second look at a Florida team they 4-2'd in their kickoff weekend matchup. That's a really fun region to me. And then you mentioned Pepperdine, and you talked about the USC side of things. Pepperdine has to be thrilled. Like, the fact that USC, San Diego, or maybe it's not USC, excuse me, but Cal, San Diego, like these familiar faces that are in their section of the draw. It's USC, San Diego, right? Not Cal, excuse me, because I think Cal's with Georgia. Yeah, so USC, San Diego, the opposite side seeds, like familiar faces. You don't have to leave the state of California for another 2 weeks as well. Right, Jay? Like, you talked about the USC maybe being losers. Pepperdine has to be the big winners.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a Pepperdine team that just lost 3 matches in a row, and I think is a valid question on whether they're even a top 8 team. And now they're a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament with a very clear path to the quarterfinals. I actually think that's what makes that Michigan quarter relatively weak. I think there are a handful of teams that are going to have to face each other in the round of 16 that could knock off either Pepperdine or Michigan. So, but Pepperdine, huge draw winner. And look, we've actually talked about this before because they have had some rough luck over the past few years, having to go indoors in Champaign, indoors in Austin. This is the year. Maybe that karma comes back for them and they get more of a straightforward path to potentially Stillwater.
Chris, you called the SEC all season long. We might have buried the lead here. Texas A&M, they get Branstein back. They're riding this high. They make the SEC tournament final. Obviously, she gets a little bit injured there, but still, on paper, this is a team that has all the pieces to compete with anyone. They get Oklahoma in their region. They get UNC as a potential super regional opponent. Brutal draw for the Aggies. What did you make of that? What were your reactions to this women's draw?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looked like. We didn't know about the Oklahoma piece, even though it was a very likely opponent in their region. But we kind of saw the writing on the wall that they were going to line up with North Carolina, and just brutal. Honestly, prior to that SEC tournament with the return of Branstein, I thought, and Jay is the foremost expert here on that side. But my feeling was, how do I not put them in like the top 4 or 5 at that point with Branstein coming back? And, honestly, I'll say I was a little bit surprised that they didn't compete as well against Georgia as they did when she wasn't there in a match that they really should have won, that Vidmanova was cramping up down 5-1 in the third, and somehow for Georgia came back to win, and it wasn't as close the next time around. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that for A&M, but regardless, even if you assume they get out of that home region with Oklahoma, a matchup with North Carolina for them is just brutal, just a horrible draw for what looks like probably 2 top 5 teams.
Jay, thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I think we've discussed this. I think there's a question in the chat around whether or not this helps Texas A&M, because they actually haven't had much competition with Carson Branstein back in the lineup. Now, again, she struggled with injuries in that final against Georgia in the SEC championship. How healthy is she? That remains to be seen. But in some ways, facing Oklahoma, a team you need to take seriously, a team that made the NCAA final in 2022, maybe that helps. They know they're going to need to be ready for this region. They're not going to be able to sleepwalk through this region, and they need to be tested with this full lineup. So it could be a good thing.
Yeah, and again, something I really enjoy, the fact that I think Oklahoma is going to be able to push A&M in doubles, and that's a point we have a lot of questions about. Brandstein coming back as a piece there, you think almost as advantageous as getting her in singles. They dropped that doubles point to Georgia. It was an indoor match. Obviously, they'll be outdoors. They'll be at home in the regional. They are the region you're maybe watching most closely. It's either that or, again, a really fun Tennessee region where they're hosting Duke, a matchup where there's just depth everywhere. What's the match calculus? Your guess is as good as mine. And joining us on the other side of this very quick break, we will have Tennessee women's tennis head coach Allison Ojeda. So stick with us as our reaction show to the 2024 NCAA draw continues here on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel. And joining us now here on our NCAA reaction show is the head coach of the Tennessee women's tennis team. Of course, her team, the number 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament this year. Let's welcome Coach Allison Ojeda. Coach, first of all, congratulations to you and the team. Top 16 seed has to feel good. What's your immediate reaction seeing the NCAA tournament draw?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Always good to spend time with you guys. But immediate reaction is just ecstatic. I mean, we've had a very good season. We definitely had some opportunities I feel like we didn't quite capitalize on, and so I knew it was going to be close. And going into the SEC tournament, found out we were playing Auburn. You know, they were 16, we were 17, so the team felt like, all right, if we can win this, we advance to the semifinals of the conference tournament, and also give ourselves a really good chance of hosting. So the team is thrilled.
Yeah, well, again, the big headline, of course, you guys draw one of the highest non-top 16 seeds in the rankings. You get Duke coming to your region. They're going to play, I believe, ETSU in round one. You guys have Murray State. Just talk me through that regional. I know, obviously, a Duke program, they're typically at the top of the NCAA rankings. They're coming to you all. What do you think of that matchup and the region more broadly?
Yeah, Murray State, congrats to them. They just won a conference tournament. And so anytime you do that, you're excited going into NCAA. So we certainly won't overlook those guys. But yeah, if we can get to Sunday, then we'll play the winner of Duke and ETSU. We saw ETSU earlier this year, so we know what to expect from those guys. And then you're right, Duke's a program that everybody knows all around the world, and any good tennis player is for sure going to think about going to Duke. And they've got a tremendous program. But we're excited. My first few years back at Tennessee, we got sent to Duke over and over and over again. So I'm excited those guys are coming our way. Jamie and his teams are incredibly familiar with, the finals and the semifinals of the NCAA tournament. So this team is going to be ready for sure.
No, again, it's one of my favorite regions, and I'm going to give John Parsons the next question after this. But watching your team from afar all season long, I think part of the fun for us is knowing that you guys can find 4 points in so many different ways. I'm curious, again, for you, going into a weekend like this, what are the strengths you guys are going to have to turn to if you're going to get through a weekend like this, advance in this NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think it's kind of been interesting. There's been quite a few matches that we've won the doubles point, lost those matches, and then lost the doubles point a couple times and won 4 singles. So I think the reality is we've got 7 opportunities to win 7 points. And it's just making sure that the whole team is firing on all cylinders that day. And I will say that if you can win the doubles point in the tournament, in my opinion, it means a little bit more emotionally than it does in the regular season. So I think that's just knowing that it's one and done. You get that 1 point on the board. It gives you a bit of momentum going into singles and some confidence. So, and Duke is good, man. At every spot, I haven't even looked at the matchups yet. Not sure who we were going to play, but yeah, we would certainly look to the doubles point for sure with our squad this year. And then Sophia's competing against the best players in the country right now at 1. Clancy Shields, who's a 2-time NCAA champion, is competing against the best players in the country right now at 2. And then Elza's picked up her level of play. She was top 20 last year, so we know what type of tennis she can bring. And here in the last 4 weeks, she's playing the best tennis we've seen. Got Alana Wolfberg, who's a lefty at that 3 spot, and then Kat, who's just the kid will just fight all day. And then we have 2 seniors at 5 and 6. So I feel good about our squad. But yeah, I mean, it's finding 4 points is key.
Yeah. No, go ahead, John. Yeah.
Coach Ojeda, congrats on the top 16 seed.
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you about Sofia Cabezas, the transfer from Iowa State. She played lower in the lineup for the Cyclones last year. She's come over to Tennessee. She scored multiple top 10 victories this season. What have you seen from her from when she came to Tennessee in the fall to her development now? And what are you looking for in the leadership you expect to see from her in the NCAA tournament?
That's a great question. When I recruited her to come here, I sat in her parents' living room and and talked with her down in, I guess it was June already, and you could just feel something about her that was just special and different. And from my standpoint, winning matters, but who we're around every day matters more. And you could just feel that she was the right person. So I was hopeful that she would come to Tennessee, but I didn't know, because she was looking at some really good other schools. And so once she came to campus, and actually, like, we had our first practice with her, you knew right away that she could be really good. I don't think she quite knew how to play in a way that allowed herself to really show off her strengths. So that's what we focused on in the fall. And we're a big time developmental program. But with that said, when you only have 1 year with someone, like, you got to be really choosy with what are we going to focus on. So we chose to focus on her strengths and make sure that, because she has so many tools, you don't really have to use all of them all the time. So let's focus on these few. And late in the fall, it clicked for her. And sure enough, this spring, she's been outstanding.
Yeah. I know you have to go win some awards, you and your team. So again, we'll let you go here shortly, Coach Allison Ojeda. My final 2 questions for you. Again, it's not just you guys hosting this weekend. The men's team going to host as well. And you are someone who cares so much about the future of college tennis, generating enthusiasm for the sport. What will your programs, both men and women, do having 3 days of NCAA tennis in Knoxville? What will you guys be doing to help, again, ensure this event gets the grandeur it deserves?
We're going to be pumping up the Little Smokies program and get the 10 and unders around and all their parents. We have an unbelievable tennis community here in Knoxville. And so we'll reach out to all those guys. We'll have some fun VIP areas. With NCAAs, it's a little bit different. So it has to be what Tennessee has to also be offered to everybody else. So, and we hope that Duke travels well, and ETSU and Murray State. Like, it'd be amazing. It's so much more fun to play in a big environment like that. So, but yeah, you're exactly right. We'll be yelling like crazy for our guys Friday and Saturday before we play, and we'll get the same from them.
Yeah, there's no better warm-up. Well, my final question, and again, I'm going to put you on the lam here, I suppose, slightly.
Sure.
Going into the postseason, is there a favorite right now in the women's field?
Ooh, let's pretend I'm not allowed to say Tennessee for a second. I mean, to Oklahoma State's credit, man, they've had a phenomenal year, and they're hosting, and so a lot of people might see that as added pressure. From my standpoint, that's why we do this, like, to have an opportunity to win the whole thing at your home courts. It's exciting. But we've played some tough teams who I think are capable of beating really anybody, and I'll put us in that category as well. So I think a lot of it comes down to the student athlete on that particular day. How are they feeling? And emotionally, can they manage those emotions in a tough situation?
Yeah, well, again, I think I speak for everyone. We're looking forward to watching it play out, something we've all enjoyed watching your team compete this season. Number 16, the 16 seed, in the draw. I get to host this opening weekend. Tennessee women's tennis head coach Allison Ojeda. Enjoy the award ceremony, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks again. You've done a great job all year. We appreciate you.
No, of course. Thank you, Coach.
See ya.
Welcome back in, everyone, to our live reaction to the 2024 NCAA tournament draw. Alex Gruskin, Chris Halioris, John Parsons here to break it all down. We talked earlier about the initial reactions. Again, mathematically, were there any shocks? Obviously, big picture-wise, what were the initial seeds and initial pathways that stood out to us? The other fun part about Selection Monday, you get to look at the lineups. That's where I want to turn next, and let's start on the men's side of things. Chris, I know you had a chance to look closely at the submitted lineups for this opening weekend of play. Give me the bullet points. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the big takeaways from a quick pass through were Ohio State's got Anthrop in front of Tracy. So Anthrop 3,
Let's
Tracy
stop there.
4.
That's what we needed. NCAA tournament has begun. My little brother was sending this text, and that's why I was so happy to get this, and I'm glad you started there, Chris Halioris, of what the records are for Ohio State, and it is just laughable how excellent they have been down low at the 3, 4, 5, and 6 positions. 24-0, 24-1, 23-0, 18-1. I'm just saying, Chris, and I apologize for interrupting you. Play them in any order. I don't really care.
It's hard to lose if you do that.
Yeah, exactly. I like that it's mixed up. What do you think?
And a school as that's as good, I'll say traditionally in doubles as they are, this is actually, that's probably the only knock you could put on them this year. I mean, obviously, given the records you just put out, you have to beat them at 1 and 2. I'm sorry, that's just the point. If you're gonna beat them, you got to beat them at 1 and 2. You probably got to take doubles, and then you got to find one of those bottom 4. But yeah, it is interesting that they've done that, but yeah, they're just so good 3 through 6.
It's hilarious that it's like you have to take doubles when they have 96-time defending All-American and Fall Nats champion Robert Cash, plus reigning NCAA doubles champion Andrew Luchanik, and you're like, yeah, but you have to take doubles. Oh, you have to beat Boulay and Kingsley at 1 and 2 as well. Guy who's made a challenger final and all the different things Justin Boulay has done as well. And so, yeah, that's a fun one. Obviously, what else do we have?
Another similar 3-4 swap. Virginia goes with the swap and puts Dylan Dietrich back up to 3 and Jeffrey von der Schulenberg to 4. I don't know that that's huge news. It's notable in that they changed it, but look, I think it's well deserved. Dietrich's been great. Von der Schulenberg maybe not as much, and von der Schulenberg at 4 is going to be ridiculous. I think it's better for them, and it's a good swap. So that was another one. Notable beyond that, JPJ and Fernley. It's JPJ 1, Fernley 2 in the initial lineups submitted, and they do put Urashek back in front of Duncan Chan. I think I had heard from a couple coaches on how that was not getting challenged, but I think that's kind of those are the big takeaways I had on the men's side.
John Parsons, I apologize. I didn't allow you to justifiably react to Tracy at 4. Again, the Florida boys are undefeated here this year, and we saw them in Florida last year, how good they were outdoors. If you have an additional reaction to that, I apologize for not allowing you to offer it. Also, any other thoughts? That Dietrich von der Schulenberg switch was something we talked about on last week's show, so to Chris's point, I don't know how shocking that is.
No, and we had seen Dietrich up there throughout the season, and he's playing extremely well. You saw that in the ACC tournament. Jeffrey struggling there, so I think that makes a lot of sense. The bigger question for Ohio State is, who were they trying to match up against, right? They make that move. Is that a UVA thing? Is that a Texas thing? Now, the two big things to keep in mind for lineups this year, Chris tweeted this out, but one is that you can change lineups every weekend. So you can change lineups before the Super Regional and before the Final 8. That Final 8, that's a new thing this year. So we could see more lineups change throughout this tournament. And we should caveat that these are the submitted lineups. They have not been reviewed or protested yet by other coaches. So it is possible that the changes we are discussing can get protested and reversed. So those are important notes on the women's side.
Well, quickly, the last thing I would point out on the men's before we switch there, Cleve Harper 7, Jonah Braswell 6 for Texas. I feel like that's worth noting out as well because 5, 6, what are they doing there? See him wall deep at that number 5 spot. He was healthy. He looked really good at the Big 12 tournament. If they have him, they are the team on paper we thought they might be back in December. Women's side, Jay, you saw the lineups. Break it down for us.
Well, the headline is something we joked about on the show. Elizabeth Scotty is up to number 1 for North Carolina after going 1-0 at number 1 this season. She has played primarily at number 2, where she is undefeated. And Fiona Crawley back again at number 2 for the NCAA tournament. Very similar story to what North Carolina pulled last year, where she was at number 1 for the majority of the season and then placed at number 2 for the NCAA tournament. This one's going to be tough to protest just because Scotty is undefeated at 2, and they didn't overturn it last year. I doubt they'll overturn it this year. Always strange to play one player throughout the season at one position and then flip them in the final days here. But North Carolina, again, leading the headlines here for lineups coming into NCAAs. A few other notes, Carson Branstein, who we've discussed on this show, she is still listed at number 1 for Texas A&M. Chloe Noel for Oklahoma is down to the number 6 spot for Oklahoma. I don't think that this is super surprising. Emma Staker's been back in that lineup. She's playing very well down at the number 6 spot, so they've been flipped. And then lastly, Elena Yu for Stanford is not listed on their depth chart at all. She has been their 7 or 8 player along with India Houghton. That is very notable. I'll also add she was not in attendance for the Pac-12 championships this past weekend in Ojai. So again, quick scan of these lineups. Those are what caught my eye though. One thing to note on the players, yes, you can change your lineups, but Elena Yu not in this lineup, can't add someone once you have submitted them here. You cannot you cannot add new players. You can move the order, but you cannot add new players after this submission.
Yeah, again, having the 2022 San Diego Girls 18s champion on the roster was an added piece of depth. Even if she wasn't playing, that just made you think, okay, even if this team feels a little injury-proof, even if something were to happen, they could have her jump in the lineup. Everyone moves up a spot accordingly, and they would still be able to be extraordinarily competitive. Yeah, shout out to us on the prediction. Scotty up to the number 1 spot. She's been that good at 2, to Jay's point. It's going to be hard to protest. If you've watched the film, you've watched her play. She's playing as well as anyone in the country right now. I mean, yeah, beyond that, nothing really stood out to me, Chris Halioris. Anything jump out to you?
No, I mean, I more looked at the brackets as a whole, and I don't know if we've got our next coach on board yet. I've got some more takes for you, Gruskin, but you tell me where we're at here.
Well, we are about to have our next coach on board. If this is a Clancy Shields related take, Chris Halioris,
Nope.
I would okay,
Not at all.
Okay, so we'll have him here in a moment. Again, going to have some fun here, react with these coaches. First, Jay, what I want to talk about next, you just look at, again, some of the best paths for these teams. And I want to start on the men's side here. Again, given we're about to have Clancy on the show, I do want to say one of my favorite matches from last year, Ohio State, Arizona, round of 16 in Columbus. Now, Arizona's the number 9 seed. They just missed out, by the way, on that top 8 seeding, Pac-12 tournament champions. They play Columbia in the Super Regional. If they can get through that, a potential rematch with the Buckeyes. I mean, I might be more fascinated by that Arizona pathway than any of the other pathways out there.
Well, I don't think you want to face an angry Arizona team. And I think they're going to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder for not getting that top 8 seed. It's pretty rare, if ever, that one of these Power 5 conference champions isn't a top 8 seed. And so to go cross country to New York, assuming they advance out of the regional, they're going to want to make it to the final site where they will want a chance at a rematch against Ohio State.
Yeah. Chris, your thoughts on the Arizona path?
I mean, look, this is just a fascinating match to see a potential rematch with Arizona and Ohio State. I like where Arizona's at. I mean, honestly, you look at that Columbia region that they've got to get through the winner of. But if you could draw up, knowing that you were going to be the 8-9, if you could have drawn up any path to get through that region, you couldn't have drawn a better one than a Columbia region that gets, a mid-pack 2 seed in Michigan, and then the 63 and 64 teams in there. I mean, things are setting up well for Arizona. I would love to see that Arizona Ohio State rematch.
Yeah, well, joining us here again on the other side of this quick break, Arizona men's tennis head coach Clancy Shields. So stick with us as our reaction show to the 2024 NCAA tournament draw continues. This is an interview I've been excited for. Joining us now on our reaction show to the 2024 NCAA tournament draw, head coach of the Arizona men's tennis team, head coach Clancy Shields. Coach, first of all, thank you for agreeing to do this. Welcome on to our show here tonight. Let's start glass half full. Pac-12 tournament champions for the first time in program history. What did that mean to you and the guys?
Well, my brother texted me on Friday night and after they won the championship and said, "Oh, you're just a regular season coach. You can't win the tournament." And so then I stopped thinking about all the winning the tournament and just trying to defy what my brother texted me. But no, honestly, it was like one of the more surreal moments. I mean, I know all of you guys on the call know, and I think any coach in the country knows. I mean, I think Stanford's a top 5 team, and they were playing incredibly well. And it was just a high-level match, an unbelievable atmosphere. The last time in Ojai, the last Pac-12 championships. I mean, it was an unbelievable evening.
Yeah. And by the way, since you brought up your brother, it was low-hanging fruit. I couldn't not make the joke on the selection show. Again, it was sitting there to be discussed. And you mentioned it, your brother, Luke Shields, obviously head coach of Boise State men's tennis team. You're going to play them round number 1 for the second consecutive season. You've also got Pepperdine, Auburn coming to town. Your thoughts on the regional when you saw it?
Yes, I mean, you don't want to play your brother first round. I mean, and also I think they're one of the toughest 4 seeds. I think they are the toughest 4 seed. So we know we have a huge challenge just on the court. It's not going to be like a warm-up match. I think we're going to have to actually come out and play our best tennis to do well. So they played here last year. A lot of those guys have been to Tucson. They've been in our environment. I think they'll be very comfortable on our home courts. And so we're going to look at this like any other match. I mean, we're going to have to come out and play our best tennis to get through round 1. And I'm not going to make it about us, but certainly, playing your brother, I mean, he kicked my butt for like 17 years of my life. So I'll try to keep it rolling a little bit, what's been happening lately. But honestly, it's a tough draw. And then Auburn beat us in the finals of the Blue-Gray tournament last year. And they played incredibly well, but watching that team celebrate in front of us and hold the trophy. I mean, I think there's some guys in our locker room that would love to see that rematch. I mean, Pepperdine, I have so much respect for Coach Schechterly. I mean, he does such a great job, and they've got a great lineup, a good veteran team. I mean, maybe not a veteran team, but they have some spots where the guys have been around, and I think it's going to be a great first round match between those 2 programs.
Yeah, and, again, I want to let Chris and then John ask the next 2 questions after this, but you mentioned your team and being motivated for a matchup like this, and getting motivated is not something Arizona men's tennis has ever been accused of struggling to do, but, the draw comes out. You guys are Pac-12 tournament champions. You beat Texas and made the quarterfinals of the National Indoors. You're not a top 8 seed. Is there a chip on the shoulder given that fact, and what was your reaction to seeing that?
No, I mean, Chris, you've done such a great job. I mean, you kind of spelled it out for us, so you just kind of took all the suspense out. But in all honesty, I mean, had you told me at the beginning of the year you were going to go 24-3, you were going to beat the second-ranked Texas, you're going to win the regular season, you're going to win the conference championship in the Pac-12 tournament, I would say, yeah, we'll probably be a top 5 seed, baby. It is just how the math plays out. It's an algorithm. I mean, Columbia's had a great season. There's a lot of teams. I mean, I think there's so much parity this year, and a lot of teams earn that. I mean, Wake Forest and Tennessee. And I mean, this is just, in past years, I felt like it was maybe 3 or 4 really good teams, and then there was teams a step below. And this year, I think it's one of our deepest fields, and there's a lot of teams that can go in and do some damage. So, I mean, they've all earned it. We'll have to earn it this weekend, but certainly, yeah, you're a little bummed. You would love to, if you could get through to host the super regional, and it is what it is. And, we'll just have to play where we need to play.
Yeah. So Coach, I got to ask, obviously, as you mentioned, I sort of take some of the suspense out of things and putting the rankings out, and you kind of saw where you were projected to go. And I figure if any coach is going to answer this truthfully, it's going to be you. You're obviously not looking past your first 2 rounds or even the next match, but it's somewhere in the back of your mind, that match with Ohio State from last year has to be sort of sitting there, and you had to see that that's a potential, earlier match than, say, like a final or a semifinal coming up. And all the guys, I'm sure the guys had to look at that and sort of see, yeah, we want another shot at those guys. That's got to be out there, no?
I think in general, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it's just kind of confusing how it pops out of who's where and what. Um, we just kind of, I will answer it in two pieces. Number one, we're always just going to look one match at a time because that's what we have to say as a coach and what we have to do. But, yeah, I don't love how it ended at Ohio State last year
Yeah.
for numerous reasons. And I would love to play that team again. And it's like I thought it was an incredible match. I thought, I mean, I have a lot of respect for their team, but I would have loved to play that one out a little bit differently. And certainly there was a time in that match where, it's 2-2 and you have 3 matches in 3 sets. And, Alex says if you beat Ohio State on their home courts, you should win a national championship. So I'm starting to think we were pretty close. Maybe that's as close as I'll ever get to winning a national championship. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, we're not looking too far ahead. I mean, they've been so dominant this year. Who would want to play Ohio State? But if you had to play someone and you want to go play a team that there's a little bit of like, all right, bad blood per se, yeah, we would love to play them. And we said this, against Stanford. No one beats Arizona twice. And, our guys kind of took that to heart. And if that comes down to where you ever got in that situation, that's the same thing. Can you beat our Arizona team twice? And, kudos to whoever can.
Coach, I had the privilege of watching that in-person match against Stanford and heard a lot of talk about Arizona's culture. For those that haven't seen your team compete in person, can you help define what it means to have a good culture at Arizona? I saw that in person with the chants and the enthusiasm, but for those that haven't seen you all play, shed a little bit light on what that means to you.
It's college sports. I'm always laughing at this when coaches are like, "Oh, you guys are too loud," and you're like, it's college sports. Let these kids have some fun. Sure, we'll put them in some parameters about some things, but like, how cool of a match was that? I mean, and how cool is it? These kids, these high school kids, these middle school kids in Ohio are like, man, this team has energy. I want to like support the Cats. And I felt like the whole city of Ohio was chanting Arizona. I mean, literally, it was maybe around 1,000 people at that final. And at the end of it, under the lights, I mean, I think these guys really have inspired people to like get behind them and to play with passion and joy. And sure, to kind of times do people take it over the top? Who doesn't? This is competition, but this is college sports. And if you don't like it, get out and go find a country club job where you can. It's not like that. But if you get in the arena, then enjoy it. And I love it when teams beat us with energy and they have something that we don't have. I always am so impressed with it. I mean, San Diego beat us this year and their energy was better off the court than us. And I tip my cap to those guys. Like they were the better team off court. And it's something that I take a lot of pride in. And I mean, we've had guys on our team. I mean, one of my favorite players of all time I've ever coached, his name's Connor Olson. And there wasn't a match after the match that his voice wasn't lost. I mean, he literally lost his voice every match pulling for his teammates. And man, I have so much out of my all-time grades of players I've ever coached. I would have to put him near the top because of like how much he gave to the team. And I think that is part of our culture. And if you don't play the matches emotionally off the court, then you're kind of spitting on Connor Olson. You're spitting on the guys who've come before you, who've laid this foundation of, hey, this is what we do. And we back each other. And, my coach at Boise always said, you either play the match physically or you play emotionally. And yeah, there's 6 guys a lot of times that get on the court and get to play the match physically. And then the other 4 or 5 guys, they get to play the match emotionally and cheer them on and help them will them to victory. And we've been able to establish that here. And it's made our program, different than a lot of others.
Yeah, and it starts at the top, as we all know, with your passion, your enthusiasm. It's something we all appreciate. For a guy like Nick Lagayev, who has been so integral in building that culture and establishing this program over the last half decade, for him to be the guy to clinch that Pac-12 championship and for him to be as reliable as he has been this season, what, I don't want to say change, but what clicked so well for him here this year?
And this has been the beauty of these 5th-year seniors. Like, I almost feel like the 5th year is where they get it. You think 4 years is a long time, but the 5th year, for some reason, these 5th-year kids, it's like the light bulb turns on and all of a sudden they're like appreciating every moment of practice and this journey. And like, it just means so much to them. And I look at his record, I'm like, whoa, he's like 16-2, 17-2. I mean, he kind of does it in a different way, but he just has this refuse to lose mentality. He's like, 100, I can't even probably say weights anymore, but yeah, he's not the most imposing guy, but his voice is so strong. It's so powerful. And you just, when you hear him, I think our team gathers a lot of strength from that. And he's just a fighter, man. It's like, I love it. But the one challenge I told him, I said, look, and one time in your career at Arizona, you have to dive for a volley. And so that's our thing now. It's just like, hey, did you dive today for a volley? And he's like, no. And then his match point to beat Stanford, he came to the net. Coach, I didn't have to. So no, but I'll tell you what, he's been so much fun to coach. And we were doing the math as we were doing an event last week, and we calculated he's put in over 2,500 hours on court with us. He's put in 5 years of his life here, almost a quarter of his life he's put in our program. I mean, it's just really meaningful that he's having the season he's having to me. And it's so fitting after he lost to Utah on that same court, having match points to take us to the finals last year, that we speeded up a year, to this year, and he clinches it on that same court and erases that memory. And, I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch. Well, again, Jay, Chris, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask after this. My last question for you, and I want to ask all the coaches we have here tonight. NCAA tournament ahead of us. It's going to be a really fun event. You talked about the depth in this field a little bit earlier. Do we have a favorite as we look at this field as we get into the month of May? Arizona excluded. You're not allowed to say yourself.
I mean, the obvious choices, Ohio State and Texas, I think are your two obvious choices. I mean, Kentucky, like what they've been able to do down the stretch has been really fun to watch. Yeah, I mean, I think Stanford's I'm sorry. I think Stanford's an unbelievable team. I mean, I would not want to play that team. And I just, top to bottom, I think those guys really have a great player identity. They know what they can do. I mean, if you said Stanford made the Final Four, I wouldn't out of eyelash. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. I think TCU, if they're healthy, I mean, who would want to run into those guys? So yeah, I think it's a really good draw, but certainly that's the fun of it. You got to go play the matches, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, we know no team's going to fight harder than yours. Chris, any final questions?
Yeah, I got one fun one for you, Coach. So Gruskin asked me sometime recently on one of our pods. He said, if you're going to get in a bar fight, not something I would do, okay, but if you were going to get in a bar fight, the head coach you're most likely to want to take in with you, and without hesitation, my answer was Clancy Shields. So excluding yourself, who are you taking?
And you can't say Luke either. No Luke.
I'd probably take Cedric from Kentucky. I mean,
that's a great answer.
Like 4 or 5 years ago, he charged at me after a call, and I was like, all right, I better buckle down and get ready for him to tackle me. And yeah, that was a good one. I mean, obviously I have a ton of respect for him, and he's an unbelievable coach, but he's a pretty intimidating dude. And I'm like, all right, but it makes you kind of brace and say, I got to get ready for this.
I love it. Yeah, no, for the record, it was my younger brother who asked that. And, again, he's not on any of the broadcasts, so I can say you guys are his favorite team. And again, yeah, you were also high on his list. Jay, any final questions?
No, it was great to see you all compete this past weekend. Quite a performance from, I thought, Colton Smith and Herman Hoyer all to split sets, really there to keep the momentum for Arizona. So congrats. It's exciting to see you guys compete at this level.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Coach Clancy Shields, good luck to you and the Arizona men's tennis team, your number 9 seeds at this NCAA tournament. Coach, appreciate you joining us tonight.
Bear down.
Welcome back in, everyone, to our NCAA tournament draw selection show, live reaction show. That's a mouthful, and that shows I've spoken way too many words here tonight. Alex Gruskin, Chris Halioris, John Parsons joining you. Chris, you're going in the big screen. You got some takes. You got some things you want to throw at Jay and I. John, Jesus, it has been a long night. Jay and I, as we look to wrap our reaction
call him
show.
John, I call him Jay. It's
I
confusing.
never call him John. Hold on. I never call him John. That was foreign to me. Like, John J. Parsons, who you see in the bottom of your screen, has often said to me, you're the only person who calls me Jay. And I take that with pride. And so to call him by his government name, I apologize to all of you out there listening. Chris Halioris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't really call him Jay as in J-A-Y. It's just a single letter.
It's Jay Tweets Tennis. He's Jay.
Jay.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree with you more. I so firmly believe that in my
That's
bones.
it. You get a letter. I mean, if you go by a letter, you've got something going for you.
That's what I'm saying. It's a term of respect, Jay. It's just
All
like
right,
you were
good.
this powerhouse. Anyways, yes, go ahead.
So this is the quiz portion of the show. A couple interesting takes, and we'll see who's closer. So first one, how many teams across the men's and women's side are going to the same location?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, Princeton,
That's one.
South Carolina.
That's two.
Jay, help me here.
Oh,
Or
those
actually,
are the
I
two
have
I
two.
knew.
Yeah, well, I beat you too. So, is this a competition or a team? Do you want to be on the same team? Let's be on the same team. That's
you
two.
could team it up here.
Notre Dame men didn't get in.
Nope.
Xavier
No.
or like Cleveland State
Nope.
or something.
Oh, is Florida State going to? No.
Nope. Because they're hosting on the men. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Florida? No.
Nope.
FIU?
hosting.
No.
Well, wait.
Yeah.
Wait. There's only
All right,
6.
I'll give you a better clue. You
Wait,
said
how-
South
yeah.
Carolina. They're actually the same match.
South Carolina State. South Carolina
Nope.
State? No.
Nope.
Oh,
Well,
who's
there's
the
only
third
okay.
team?
There's only
Oh,
6
I know this.
hosts.
Oh.
Texas A&M is A&M Corpus Christi going to Texas A&M on both? No.
That's a great. There are 6 teams. You said.
There are 6
For the
teams that are
regions
hosting
you're-
both.
The regions you're missing one. You're missing South Carolina's opponent, which is the same on both sides, oddly enough.
Oh, Old Dominion.
There you go. And now you're missing a Tennessee and Ohio State.
Murray State.
No.
Oh my God, who's the other matchup?
ETSU.
ETSU. 's a
ETSU, there
great
you go,
freaking
Jay.
call.
That's-
hey, good
that's
teamwork,
one.
Jay.
Last one left at Ohio State.
Vanderbilt. Boom.
You got it.
Oh yeah, Vandy.
Yeah,
That's-
there it is.
all right.
Let's
Now-
go.
The other quiz section.
And by the way, Simon Earnshaw going to join us after this question. Chris, go for it.
Everybody loves to ask this. How many regions on the men's and women's side, if you broke the seeds down by a traditional 2, 3, 4, how many regions did not get a 2, 3, 4?
Columbia, men.
We don't have to name them because there's too many to name.
Oh, okay.
How many?
Oh.
32 regions. I'm going to say 11.
I'll go less. I'll go
Yeah,
8.
That was too high.
Too high. It's actually 14.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, unbelievable, but unbelievably, 6 of the men's regions and 8 of the women's regions do not have a 2, 3, 4 by traditional seedings if you break them down, 16 at a time. Crazy. But that's the travel matrix for you.
That's half the fun of this NCAA tournament draw. And again, I appreciate the quiz here from Chris Halioris as we wait. Again, we will be joined here by NC State women's tennis head coach Simon Earnshaw, who will be our final guest here. A lot of fun. And again, I mentioned this earlier. Like, we're chasing history. I think 2006, Jay, the last time we had an undefeated national champion, right? Somewhere around that range. And obviously on the men's side, we're not going to have an undefeated national champion unless Denver can do something really special. But Ohio State looking for their first NCAA title, and they'd be the first team, by the way, since Wake Forest in 2018 to win indoors and outdoors in the same year. Obviously, this Texas group who has done everything, it feels like, but take home a national championship. Like this is their last go-around. Spiz, Waldy, Braswell, Harper, It's been a really fun core. UNC looking to defend their title. Again, like this Michigan team, the seniors they have. Jay, as we wait for Simon to join us here, what's your favorite of these fun again, pick a storyline. What's your number one coming out of selections Monday?
Well, we'll focus close to home and we'll talk about Michigan for a moment. Michigan women seeded number 3. Last year at this time, Michigan men, also a top 8 seed.
Oh, here we go.
At this point in the season, selection show, Gruskin, did you feel better about the Michigan men's chances of winning the men's title last year or the Michigan women's chances of winning the title this year?
This is such a great question. This is such a great question.
If he doesn't say the women, we're booting him off the show.
Okay, here's the thing. I watched Michigan 4-0 Virginia last year at the National Indoors, and it remains the most amazing thing I've seen in the last 5 years of my life. Like, to watch what Fenty did against Iñaki Montes on that day at 1, Styler, what he did to Vander Schulenberg, now outlawed in the state of Illinois. Like, they looked that good, and it just felt like, again, they were waiting for the doubles point to click. I'd seen this, again, this Michigan team was exactly last year's Michigan men's team, where they were Big Ten. They had won a Big Ten tournament championship. They had beaten an Ohio State. They had beaten a top 5 Baylor team. They had done all the things you do in the lead up to a significant NCAA tournament run. Obviously, again, you can say all of that about the Michigan women as well, and it's the same seniors, Jaden, Kari, Gala, like the energy they bring. They have that extra 10% you need. They're not going to be afraid to go to Stillwater, a place they have already played this year. They know exactly what to expect in that hostile crowd. They are maybe more prepared for that more than anything. And again, I think Michigan teams will be predisposed to playing better tennis in Oklahoma than they are in Florida in the month of May, just like geographically and atmosphere-wise. Again, the difference is this team made a National Indoor Final. I think this year, I'm going to get there. This is why the women's selection show went 41 minutes. I think, I think you have to go with this year's team because, again, they've beaten more teams throughout the course of this season. They didn't have any hiccups. They were that good all Big Ten season play. They made a National Indoor Final. Like, they've corrected things that weren't there last year. Like, they're better at 6 singles than they were last season. Piper Charney has been that missing piece. Her and Reese Miller in doubles. Like, this is just a more complete team. That's a higher, like, again, they are higher in the pedigree rankings than the Michigan men were going into the national championship. Now, the reason I would say the Michigan men, and that's my answer, is because it was in Orlando, not Stillwater. And the fact that Oklahoma State's number 1 undefeated and playing at home, that's a bigger hurdle than I think the Michigan men had to conquer last year. That would be the case for them. I'd pick Michigan women. That's my answer to the question. Simon Earnshaw is ready to join us here. So, again, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be back with our last guest. Do you want to react here quickly, Jay?
Oh, that was quite the pivot. I think you said both. So,
no, women. The answer is the Michigan women.
Okay.
The answer is the Michigan
women, to be clear. Okay.
But you like how I make both arguments?
Yeah.
Come on. All right. We'll be back with Simon Earnshaw in a moment. All right, all of you tuning in to our live reaction show, some of you might argue we saved our best guest for last. It is always a pleasure to be joined by a man who, of course, last season led his team to their first NCAA team final in program history. This year, he sees his team as the number 15 seeds in the draw. It's NC State women's tennis head coach Simon Earnshaw joining us. Coach, let's just start there. Your reaction to that number 15 seed. A coach earlier said Chris kind of spoils all of the drama that comes with waiting, but obviously that flip with Florida, what was your reaction there and ultimately where you landed in the draw?
my reaction was sending Chris about 20 DMs on X today. He likes that. He likes that. I'm not really sure what to think of that, to be honest with you. I'm all about head to head. I think that that makes a lot of sense within a certain point band. But I'm not sure I'm completely in agreement with it being top 50 or, in some ways kind of makes me look at that road trip we took to play Michigan and Oklahoma and wishes I hadn't played that one now. But I mean, John was quite vocal about that in the preseason pod, wondering why on earth we would ever do that. So potentially he was right.
One of those rare moments where we find again the blind squirrel finds the acorn. I want John again. You asked the next question, Chris as well, but again, what it's like to prepare for an NCAA tournament run. How is this team feeling heading into that May stretch? Do you feel like this team is going to be peaking at the right moment?
I think I've done this enough times where you come off a season like last season, where irrespective of whether we won or we're in the situation we were coming off last year's national final, there's a little bit of a sense of a hangover. I mean, you try to avoid with that many players who were part of that run, and in fact, we've got players who we've done this 3 years in a row now, that you think, okay, we'll just get to the end of April and May, and then we'll just turn it on. It doesn't work like that. So I think we try to treat it the way that I've always done through the years, and in some ways that can, I wouldn't want to use the word stale, but you're reinventing the wheel a little bit too much, and hopefully we're trying not to go through the motions, but definitely we're in pretty familiar territory right now. I mean, let's be honest. It's going to be South Carolina or Tennessee every single year until we sort out this 400-mile rule and minimizing flights. So, I mean, it's another year. And I mean, for NC State to be hosting a regional is quite an accomplishment based on our history, even though we've done it 5 times in a row. And I feel like, I mean, we look good in practice. Feel like some of the variability that we've had this year hopefully smooths itself out, and we do. I will say this though: 2 years ago we hosted the men's and women's with that whole Middle Tennessee, Arizona, whatever the heck that was, and we got rain, and I'm just hoping that doesn't happen again.
I think we're all hoping that there is minimal rain and also minimal tornadoes if we do get to Stillwater. But Coach, I want to ask you about that variability, because you look at this roster right now and you have very veteran players in Rancelli, Abrams, Raetsky. Some of them have struggled this season. And how do you balance leaning on them for that experience, those players who helped you make that NCAA final, but also that stale factor that you talked about? What are you working with them on to make sure that they are peaking here in May, a time that they know how to do that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not an easy thing, because you're trying to treat everybody equally, and at the same time, there are different people and different individuals that are going through life, even though it seems like as a team, we all play these matches and approach them in the same way. Life does have other things going on. And I think particularly, as you said, we have 4 seniors on our team. I will just say that Sophie and Gina actually are really age-wise what would be only juniors in college, because they started college a year early. So we're not as veteran from an age standpoint as you would think, with this many. In fact, I remember looking at Duke's roster and thinking, heck, the only girl on their team that would fit age-wise on our team is Katie Codd, and the rest of them are older than ours. So, but think the end of eligibility comes with a lot of trepidation and kind of uncertainty for what comes next, whether they're going on to continue playing tennis, which, you know, quite a lot of ours have done, or they're moving into the next phase of their life. And I think that uncertainty has definitely been a big X factor with our team this year, where things that they always knew, whether it was tennis or academically, and had always been on track to do it, all of a sudden you start changing your mind, or things happen in your life that you change your path. And so we've sort of had to deal with it in a multitude of ways, and somehow try to be consistent at the same time, and then try as much as we could to keep the focus on the tennis piece, which at times has been, you know, we've had some real high highs this year, and we've had, unfortunately, a couple of regrettable outcomes, particularly one in the north of upstate New York, for sure. Yeah. I don't think I even answered your question there, did I, John?
No, I'm getting the sense that life comes in the way, and as these seniors are approaching end of their time at NC State, it's a big inflection point. So hopefully they'll be playing their best tennis. I know you have to focus on the task at hand this coming weekend, tricky South Carolina team, but I am curious, as you look ahead, you potentially have a round of 16 with Stanford, but I assume the message has to be to focus on this weekend. How do you avoid looking too far ahead with this team, knowing that they're going to face potentially a tough South Carolina team in round 2?
Yeah, we've played South Carolina each of the last 4 seasons, and then there was a determination not to play. Actually, did we play last year as well? Yeah, we did play last year, first game of the season. Last year,
that was when
Columbia.
we were looking for Diana, see if she was eligible, and she was just on the sidelines.
Yeah, she accompanied us to that match. Yeah. So look, I mean, we're very familiar with South Carolina's program, and look, I'm very familiar with Dom and what he's done at Old Dominion as well. I think that's going to be a heck of a match. We also played South Carolina State in the first round last year, and one of our players was struggling in that match, and I think one that would be hard to guess based on how the team event and then the singles event progressed. So I think look, we're NC State. We don't really look past anybody. I think this season has shown that we wouldn't be smart to do that. I think sometimes last year we maybe got a little bit ahead of ourselves as well. Our margins are really quite small, I think, at the end of the day, and especially in the format that we play. And if you look at our stats and some of our data on some of these matches, you actually wonder how on earth that even could happen in a match. So we're not going to take anything for granted, and just like I said, just going to hope it doesn't rain and that the matches happen at the right time. We've got graduation here on Friday and Saturday as well to deal with, which I think is a really important rite of passage for these what were 2020 high school grads, and they didn't get any graduations in their high schools back in 2020. I think Southern Cal pulling the plug on their graduation ceremony is absolutely just not okay when these kids didn't have them in high school either. So we've got a lot to fit in, and I'll actually in some ways be happy once we've got the graduations out of the way and we can start to play tennis this weekend. So next weekend and any potential travel, which unless something happens out there, and last year obviously UCLA came to Duke and changed the parameters of the bracket that we were in, and I want to say that Auburn even last year went to Miami and beat Miami and ended up here in Raleigh as well. So I think in many ways history tells you that you've just got to look at the teams ahead of you and then figure out where you're going. But yeah, it does look like whoever gets through is going to cross the country, which for ACC teams may be a common theme.
Yeah, a little glimpse A little glimpse into the future. Chris, I apologize. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. I guess before I ask Coach, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And I saw you come on the show. I mean, I got to do this. And then
Yeah.
But look, without asking about the team specifically, you had brought it up early on in terms of sort of the bracketing, and they talked in the off season in the annual meeting about actually seeding the top 32 teams in the tournaments is something they've done in women's soccer and volleyball, and they were trying to propose that pilot this year for the tennis championships that ultimately got voted down by the NCAA. But I would assume that that's something that when I say that, for those listening that don't know what we mean, instead of seeding just the top 16, we would seed the top 32 so that you would get a true 1 versus 32, 16 versus 17 type matchup, and then just fill in 33 through the end type thing. You talked about how the fact that you're going to get sort of the South Carolinas every year type thing. I assume that's something you're in favor of and you'd like to see.
Yeah, I actually thought we were moving ahead with that this year until potentially a week or two ago, and I'm not sure. It might even have been you that pointed that out to me, but somebody did, and it was quite disappointing. I think when Arizona State had to play at Oklahoma in 2022, that why the committee, even with the parameters we have, would be choosing to fly the number 17 team in the country to play at the site of the second seed is pretty disappointing. I think the difference in success that you have to be 17 versus potentially what would be 31 is quite considerable. I'm sure we can see that from the standpoint of results, and I don't think it's at all something that in any other bracketing sort of format of any sport in the world that you end up with these outcomes. And with the ACC and the SEC being just so intertwined for land, particularly in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida, it was pretty clear that if you look at Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Duke, 3 of them were predictably going to go to Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, and that's ultimately what happened. And there was a period there where Wake Forest, I think, went to Georgia 4 or 5 straight years. Play the whole season, just have the same outcome, no matter what happens. And I don't know if that happens as much out west. I'm sure John would probably know more about that. But I tell you right now, if you're a host out west, given that there's no regionals in California, I can guarantee you they're playing all of these on Friday and Saturday to try and get people to be running as quick as possible across the country. Yeah. That's for sure. So, I think it causes unnecessary, I would say, outcomes that I just, for the lack of, I don't think actually the NCAA provides any support anyway for the first and second rounds. Relatively financially. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure if the majority of the schools would be like, okay, if that's how it is, we'll go. Because there's nothing that would tell me that wouldn't be the case otherwise. And I think particularly when you end up with these brackets where you get 2 free seeds, or they sort of really start to move it around. I think we had one a few years ago where we had a 2 and 2 frees and no 4 seed in our region. I just don't understand how you get to the point where you think that that's okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, we know changes are on the horizon in the sport. Let me ask you one last question, though, before I let you go. NC State women's tennis head coach Simon Earnshaw, to what we've asked every coach here. We know the depth, and your team has seen all the teams. You've played North Carolina 3 times now. You've played Michigan a couple of times. I don't believe you guys have played Oklahoma State, but do you have a favorite right now heading into May, heading into this postseason stretch? Can't answer yourselves. That's the only rule.
You're not really giving me any comedy questions, are you, this evening? It's all extremely serious.
Yeah. Look, I've always got fun for you. You know, I'm saving that. Here's the real thing: is I'm going to be bothering all of you coaches for a press row a little bit later. That's what I'm saving it for.
Okay. All right. I see you saving the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I think most metrics would point out that Stanford and UNC have the best rosters. So are they? They're not on the same side of the draw, right? I don't think.
Opposite sides.
No. So I mean, that's two of last year's Final Four. We were one of them. Georgia was the other. I think when it comes down to it, one thing that you really can't not look at is experience in the latter stages of the tournament. I just don't think you see too many times when a team runs all the way through there without their players having made a Final Four or potentially a final in the past. I think that was the same for my teams in Division Two. I just think occasionally the moment gets the better of you. And realistically, and I think you could see that in our championship match last year, if you don't play something that approximates the best match of your life or your career, you're probably, in all eventuality, not going to find a way to win the title. I think Howard's teams at Texas did a good, I mean, they seemed like they played lights out in 2021. And I think similar with Pepperdine. I think the same thing, just they got lightning in a bottle in 2022. And last year, I think we were playing great. I mean, the conference tournament, ACC, we probably played our best match. And we didn't quite have that in the final, but I wouldn't say we played a poor match. I mean, we just got beat by a better team. I mean, whatever it was that happened down on courts 5 and 6, when they needed it, they found it, and we just couldn't finish them. And I think that's what you got to have. And I just don't think you can do that if you're not used to being in that setting. Indoors is one thing, but this is a totally different monster in the national event.
Yeah, no, I love to hear it. Well, then I will throw one quick fun one at you from Connor L in the chat, because we promised we'd do that. He wants to know your opinion. Scotty or Crawley, who should be the UNC #1? I think that's a fun question.
All right, so I'm gonna give you a double answer to this one, right? Because I noticed that somebody on here was putting a lot of posts on X earlier on about lineups. I haven't even looked at the lineups yet, but let me just say this: is we're gonna have back-to-back years where the #1 player in the nation is not the #1 player in the lineup that's entered.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's Mary Stoyano right at that #2 spot for A&M.
And I don't think Scotty's even lost a set this year, right?
Sounds about right.
Sounds
No,
about right.
no,
She hasn't lost a match.
I watched her lose one. Not at Duke. She flipped that one, but I lost her. Definitely a set, not a match.
So it was probably one that wasn't finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't understand. I mean, not only will they not be the #1 player on their own team, we're then going to seed them #1 in the bracket for the NCAA singles tournament. I don't get it. I mean, somebody's going to have to start writing a bunch of stuff and sending it in. But I mean, I'm guessing that those two teams are going to play each other potentially.
Sure. No, I mean, again, it's something for us to look forward to. I'll tell you what, Chris Halioris takes all the fun out of all of the typical predictions now.
I'll just stop next year.
Yeah, no, again, we don't get to predict the brackets, so lineups is really all we get to have the fun with. But something that's certainly always fun, getting to ride the roller coaster that's been this 2024 NC State season. As you mentioned, it's some really fun highs, and certainly feels like the opportunity for more of them on the horizon. So head coach Simon Earnshaw, we always enjoy getting the chance to chat with you. Thank you for joining us here tonight.
All right, cheers, guys, and I'll see you guys soon.
All right, welcome back in. Our final moments here of our live reaction show. Feels like an hour and a half is enough reacting, so I'll just open up the floor one more time. Let's start with you, John J. Parsons, your reaction to everything we learned here today, and again, anything we might have learned from the interviews.
Well, I actually thought the best question in these interviews was who's the favorite. You heard Clancy Shields talk a lot of teams didn't mention two-time defending champion Virginia in that list of teams. You just heard Coach Earnshaw not mention 27-0 undefeated Oklahoma State as a favorite there. So very interesting to hear who these coaches think are dangerous en route to the title. Overall, big picture, I think the brackets are fairly even. There are definitely some spots where I think maybe a little softer than others, and we'll talk about those in the breakdown. And always a decent amount of fun lineup mix-ups here to chew on. But overall, pretty straightforward. No big controversies this year that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I think that's true. We talked about Arkansas on a couple of shows previously, so we didn't really relitigate that. That's really the only controversy, lowercase c, dare I say, we've had in this selection process. Because, again, the mastermind behind it all, 2012 Nate Silver, Chris Halioris, helped nail everything to help prepare us for this. Chris, your final thoughts on Selection Monday?
Yeah, so one of the things I always like to look at, and I'm definitely not going to catch them all because I don't know all the rosters inside and out, but at first glance, I see one matchup on both the men's and the women's side that involve transfers playing their former either in the first or second round. Gruskin, I already alerted you to the men's, so you're not allowed to answer. Jay, do you have them?
So transfer playing their former team in the first round?
First round or second. The men's side, it's a second round match. On the women's side, it's a first round match.
Ooh.
And I didn't let Gruskin know this one, so he can answer the women's match.
Ooh. Huh. Are Florida State and UCF playing each other in anything?
No. They would be second round in the men's side. But
okay.
So on the men's side, it's Chris Lee for Tennessee.
Oh yeah, you did text me that.
Facing
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
In the second round. In the women's side, Jay, since I know you know it well, I'll give you a clue. It's down in the bottom right corner. I'm trying to think whose region that is. That's the Stanford region. But it's
LSU and Baylor.
Oh yeah.
Anita Sadieva going from Baylor to LSU, playing each other in the first round.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love seeing those. So just a little extra added excitement to the first round match.
Yeah, again, there's going to be a lot of good college tennis on the horizon, and we're really looking forward to covering so much of it here at Cracked Rackets. We will get to our plans moving forward here over the next couple of days, but your reminder, we're going to have live shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday moving forward. Jay will be back with me tomorrow to break down the women's draw in more depth. Chris on Wednesday to break down the men's draw. Thursday's going to be a wild card show. Again, going to have some fun on that one. I think Chris and Jay can guess who the guest is going to be on that show, but we might have a couple of other additions as well. So, again, a lot of fun planned on the horizon. May Madness is approaching. We got you covered here at Cracked Rackets, covering all of the action. Of course, a thank you to both John J. Parsons, Chris Halioris for joining me here for tonight's show. A thank you to Tennessee women's tennis head coach Allison Ojeda, Arizona men's tennis head coach Clancy Shields, and, of course, NC State women's tennis head coach Simon Earnshaw for joining us. And thank you to super producer Daniel Westoff. Makes everything you see on your screen possible. With that said, for everyone here who contributed to tonight's show, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Gentlemen, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow night. Thanks, everyone.